Oh, Yetta, I got sand in my eyes, I think.
Well, then get your head out of the sand.
Moving forward with the Dekker Team. Moving forward together with the Dekker Team.
So, welcome to another episode of Life's Inside Track. I'm Yetta Dekker.
And I'm Ken Dekker.
And we're excited that we get to come alongside you to share techniques, thoughts, tips, and tools that we all need. We all deserve. You, I, everyone. So we can turn our house into home, our families thrive, and we live the best life possible. We're going to consider today that when messy things happen, when difficult things happen, that we we don't know what to do, we don't know how to solve it, we're kind of maybe responsible, at least in part, right? Putting our head in the sand is generally not the best solution, probably never the best solution.
But I kind of like to avoid conflict.
I know that's your life's passion, shall I say.
Oh, that's harsh.
Well, harsh in truth, right?
In the past,
Yes.
I avoided conflict and embarrassment and hard things.
Right.
And you know what it was? I think I told myself a story.
What was this? I'm almost afraid to ask, except I probably have a clue. So what was the story that you would tell yourself in the past? And I recognize this isn't a thing that you do very frequently anymore. And every so often it causes us some distress because that behavior shows up unexpectedly.
Yeah. And I think what happens is it was a story like, oh, you should have done something different, or you did the wrong thing, or sometimes it's, oh, it'll blow over if I don't say anything. It's not my issue. I didn't cause it. All these different stories. And generally what happens is as I told myself these stories, then certain emotions would come up. Emotions like fear. Ugh, hate that emotion, right? Fear, like guilt or embarrassment. And when emotions come up, I find sometimes they stop me from doing what I should do or what would be best to do. And so I stick my head in the sand and I get sand in my eyes.
And it's uncomfortable, right? Except not as uncomfortable as maybe stepping into the situation.
Oh, but then when the situation blows up, it doesn't always blow up, but frequently it blew up to a much higher level because I avoided it. And then it's worse.
Well, it is. And maybe you can relate to what Ken is sharing here, that sometimes it may even feel kind. I know many of my clients have said, well, I'm not going to have that hard conversation because it seems like it's harsh or that it's not nice to have the conversation. And yet not having the conversation, I might suggest, is actually more unkind than having the conversation, because just because I don't talk to somebody about the difficulty, their home isn't selling, for argument's sake. So I decide I'm going to hide my head in the sand. I'm not going to have the tough conversation because they've already told me what they want to sell it for. And they're certain, and their neighbors have told them, and their family has told them, and they're sure their tax bill is showing an assessment much higher than where it's now at on the marketplace. And so it's hard to have that conversation, that real conversation. So do I hide? I'm not so good at hiding. I would be more inclined to step into it and have the uncomfortable conversation. But oftentimes I hear agents that come to us for training say, I can't have that conversation. It's like, well, here's the bottom line. The market is going to have the conversation with the seller anyway. And you could have saved the client.
Say more about that. Because I understand it, but maybe our listener doesn't understand what you meant by the market will say it if I don't.
Right. The market's going to tell you the truth, because if your home is on the market at a certain price and people are either coming to look at it, which means the price is probably pretty close if they're coming to see it, but you're never getting an offer, and seldom will a buyer say to you, it's overpriced. If the buyers or the agents are giving feedback saying it's overpriced, know that it's overpriced, because typically they're just going to say it's not for me. They're going to find a reason that it doesn't suit them because they're really not your pricing advocate. They're
Yeah.
not your,
They're going to say the condition's not good enough. The house is too small. The floor plan doesn't work.
it's a closed floor plan and I don't like it.
The yard's not good enough or whatever. The location's too poor. All of those things mean
It's overpriced
typically.
to that buyer, meaning that buyer feels they can get better value that suits them better. So a perfect example was recently we had a home on the market. We suggested it needed to be at $850 because we really knew that, or $800, pardon me. We knew that was the max price this home was going to sell for. The client said, no, $850, $850, $850. And we said, we can try it for 2 weeks. And if we don't get any offers, then, and so we had some showings. We had reasonable number of showings. No one in that first round really came out and verbally said, hey, that's crazy overpriced. But we had somebody say, floor plan, closed floor plan, therefore it's not for us. Funny though, we repositioned the property at $800 2 weeks later, and that person came with an offer.
Yeah, because they said, you know what? For $50,000 less, I can open it up and make it open concept.
Or I can
spend
live
some
with
money.
it. Right.
Yeah.
Or I can live with it, which is
Right.
what happened. So the objection is an objection based on the price point. So that's what I mean by the market communicates, or if nobody's looking at it, now you know you're way off in terms of price point. Right? So that's just a little tidbit for you. If you've ever had your home on the market and thought this is so frustrating, not the last 3 years, but certainly now again, and for 30, some of the 35 years I've been in the industry, things haven't
That's a
moved
long time, Yetta. A long
Okay, well, you're
time.
coming up to 30, so I don't think you sound much different than I do. So the bottom line is burying my head in the sand and not telling my client the truth just means that the buyer's will based on their actions. And that's what I mean by the market will.
Right. Okay. And recently you helped somebody because there was a tenant that was not leaving the house. They weren't leaving it nice. The buyer was coming to do a final walkthrough before they were to close. And you knew it was an issue, right?
The writing was on the wall.
You could have stayed at home, let the sale fall apart. But what did you do?
Well, I got up extra early that morning and I got in my car unexpectedly because I wasn't planning on doing this, but I woke up going, this isn't probably going to go well. So I went out to see the sellers who had taken their day off work for the closing to do the last of the cleanup in the one side that was vacated. And they had paid cash for keys. So they had followed the principles, followed the strategy, done everything right. Phenomenal, beautiful people. But it's kind of desirous sometimes to stay out of the middle of the mess. And so we cleaned up all day. I stayed long enough I stayed all day to meet with the agent that was coming, met with her before her buyers came, then met with the buyers, called the lawyers, did everything in my power to make it work. And when things got worse after that, believe it or not, I stayed in touch. I mean, to me, I got to stay even closer to you when things don't go as per plan. Good news is it did work out at the end, but it was a fair bit of cash for keys.
Yeah. So really, what I'm going to challenge is what situation are you either in your financial world, your relational world, your physical world, or your mental world that it's time for you to stop hiding your head in the sand. We're grateful to be partners with you on this journey towards wisdom, wealth, and worth.
Moving forward with the Dekker Team. Moving forward